Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us here for another CSE podcast. Today I'm joined with Josie Robertson, who is Senior Sales Director with One-to-One Conferences. Thank you for joining me, Josie.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Josie and I also know each other because she sits on the Women in Mining board alongside myself here in BC.
That's right.
Listen, we're going to talk all things mining. We're going to talk about how issuers should be getting out there when they have to leave Canadian borders, what opportunities there are for them to raise capital, build liquidity, and tell their story globally.
Exactly.
So let's dive into it. Tell us about One-to-One.
Okay, so One-to-One, we've been around for 13 years now, so it's been a while.
Yep.
And we're a global company that brings issuers together with some of the biggest investors around the globe.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the uniqueness of the conference itself. But first, tell us what fantastic locations you hold the conference.
All right. Well, we start the year in Cape Town, and then we go to Hong Kong. We also do London in May, New York in June. We do one global online event in October. Okay. And then we go back to London and Dubai. So we also have done shows across Australia, Las Vegas, Singapore. So we've kind of been in all markets globally. But yeah, right now we are just honing in on those particular events, and we've been just trying to make them as strong as possible.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the conference? Because this isn't a standard conference that maybe issuers do where they go, they stand in a big room, they stand behind a booth, people come in and walk around for the day. Tell us how One-to-One is different.
Yeah, so our events, they're all pre-scheduled one-on-one meetings with pre-vetted investors. So yeah, it's, very different than being behind a booth where you have no idea who's coming up to you. Are they an actual investor? Are they just looking for swag, which we see a lot at some of these these conferences.
Hey, I like my swag.
Yeah, I know. So do I. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, so it's very different. So the corporates, they will know exactly who they're meeting with. They'll have bios on everyone.
Yeah.
They know everything that they're about to expect for the next 2 days of what their meetings are going to look like.
Right. So they have one-on-one scheduled meetings. They're booked for 2 days solid. Tell us about who they're meeting, because you're pretty curative in the people that you bring in the room.
Yeah, no, definitely. So like I said, we've got an investor acquisition team, okay. And they're located globally. So what they do all day, every day is look for new investors, tapping into that new markets and just vetting them. Yeah. So, and sometimes it can be very tricky. A lot of these guys, they'll wear numerous hats. So, sometimes it is a bit tricky, but if there's any questions, we do ask to see, what does your portfolio look like? Yeah. And just so that we are ensuring that we're bringing the right people to our corporates to not dilute our shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the reason that we're having this conversation is, we've noticed at the CSE, a lot of our issuers are needing to go outside of Canadian borders to raise capital. And I think here's an opportunity where you guys are creating access to investors that are happy to invest into Canadian projects. Yeah. They're comfortable and have a good risk appetite, especially in the mining sector. Are you seeing that this has grown and developed over the years? Do you think there's an increasing demand for this?
100%. So I've been with the company for 10 years. Yeah. And wow, what a difference, from even 5 years ago. Yeah. I think things really changed over COVID. And yeah, it's people need to tap into those other markets because as great as Canada is, there's so many deeper pockets outside of Canada. Yeah. And I think the key with, a lot of these companies, they need to go global to really try to get themselves out there and grow and increase liquidity. There's only so much money to go around in one market at a time. And if you focus in on just being in one market or having all your investors in one market, if anything happens to, let's say, the Canadian dollar or the Australian dollar, wherever it is that you have all your investors, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Like if the dollar drops to something not good, then, things will happen with your company.
Yeah.
So it's really good to have your investors spread out and have your name just on the radar across all markets.
Yeah, and I think, traditionally, I think the one value that the Canadian junior markets have really brought is this opportunity to be able for people to become public, to enter the public arena, to be able to raise their initial rounds of capital. They have very supportive investors here in Canada that will come back on future financing. So they have that real base. And once they get to a size where they need to raise a larger amount of capital, that's when they can really kind of explore the globe as far as building that. But also, I think there's also a really safe understanding from global investors investing into the Canadian capital markets, wouldn't you say?
100%. Yeah. I mean, most of the big mining companies seem to be coming out of, traditionally have been out of North America, really. But yeah, no, it is so important to be able to have those different pools of capital. Like I said, it's just you need to be able to tap into these different markets and to be able to grow your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when people are joining one-to-one conferences, they're not necessarily raising capital. They're also going out there to build liquidity and tell their story, right?
I would say over the last 5-6 years, that is the biggest thing. That is the biggest difference that I've seen. Before, it was, people are looking for placements or they're doing financings, but for the most part, people want to have investors that can buy on market.
Yeah.
So we actually really changed the way that we were focusing how we were finding investors and looking for those on-market buyers because everyone wants it. Because when you are trying to prove to your shareholders, the best way that you can do that is with your stock price, moving up. Yeah. And so I think that's one thing that we've really done very well. And, even in the markets before, this market we're in right now, over the last 2 years, we have heard more of our clients tell us that they found, 5, 8, I've had someone say 12 new shareholders out of one conference that are buying on market.
Yeah.
So that is really going to make a huge difference. For instance, like in Dubai, we do our Dubai show. I had one client come up to me at another event this year and just say like, I can't believe what happened to our stock.
Yeah.
It went up 3 times over like right after the show, and it's maintained itself. And it's funny because it was a smaller company, and we initially thought that you needed to have like you need to be a big company to go into that market, but we were wrong. Like, as long as you had a good story and something that the investors were, excited about and felt like, hey, you know what, I can get in early and I can really see some upside here.
Yes.
It was happening, and it was happening right on the spot.
Yeah. And I think the one thing is, public companies, there's a lot of pressures that they have. And for the public companies, they need to enter the capital market arena. They do their financings here. And then there's that other element that a lot of the time they forget about is that ongoing liquidity and supporting the stock price. There's also a lot of movement that we're seeing from an online perspective. So people are trying to promote themselves online, trying to generate awareness from a liquidity perspective. What are your thoughts there as far as our issuers just getting out there and directly being in front of strategic investors?
I think that they're, for our shows, personally, and just in general, I think that, there is a fine balance for people to have that institutional and, on market type of buying, right? So the high net worths and stuff. So I think that it's a very fine line, and you need to have a balance, and a lot of companies don't, right? So I think that's why they're trying to find different ways and trying to tap into different markets, which is what we're trying to do, right? Trying to find these different investors and
you're doing the work for them.
Yeah, well, we're trying to. When they do come to our shows, we do help also build schedules.
Yeah.
And just to make sure that, because we know our investors for the most part. So helping build someone's schedule, I'll be like, okay, I know what you're looking for right now.
Yeah.
You've told me exactly you're looking for A, B, and C. And so I'm only going to hone in on those investors that could potentially offer that for you, what you're looking for. So there's a lot of that.
Okay. Now, when these investors go, and I've been to some of these style of events, it's intense. They do a few days of one-to-one, constant back-to-back, presenting their company and having that dialogue. Do you have any advice for issuers that are looking to do that as far as presentation skills? Any thoughts there? You must guide people all the time on this.
Honestly, I think that's the biggest thing that I've seen where people go wrong, not having the right presenter.
Okay.
As great as it is to be super technical, but you also need to have someone that can get the investor excited.
Okay.
To have that passion when they're speaking and be able to really it's really about, I think, that passion and be able to make them understand what the upside is in becoming an investor and, becoming part of the story.
Yeah.
So I think that is a huge part. We do help certain companies more than others with, we have an IR program where we can, we'll coach and we'll do all of that stuff for them. But yeah, I'd say the average person who goes to an event, having the right person be able to present and be able to put forth that story. Is huge.
It's huge. Okay.
Yeah.
And what about, do you have any guidance on if you're an issuer, depending on where your project is or what type of commodity you're looking for, should they be looking at specific jurisdictions to go and do this? Should they just cover the world? I mean, how do you decide if you want to leave Canada? How do you decide where you go?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really depends on, where are your current shareholders mainly. If you don't have any in a certain market, I always say that is a great chance for you to start building.
Sure.
I think honestly having your name out there globally is so important. So I always suggest, and it's tricky because it's expensive, for a company that's a junior to say, okay, I'm going to go into Australia, I'm going to go into Asia, I'm going to go into the Middle East. You're talking could be hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time you're paying for everything, right? So, and typically when you go into a market, you don't want to just go once. So this is a long-term commitment. Yeah. And what I often tell people is if they've not done any marketing at all, they're new, a newer story, do something like one of our online shows, because what's going to happen there is that you've got this global network. You're going to touch, every single market. Yeah. And then that's going to give you a really good idea of, hey, you know what? I thought that I should be going only into Europe or the UK, but I actually got a lot of uptick for my meetings through the Asian market. Okay. So, maybe I need to go into Hong Kong for the next show. Yeah. It really can help guide a company for a very low price, like a quarter of the price. You're going to be able to touch a lot of different markets. So I think that is one thing that people should consider, even though they may not want to do online. Like I said, it's a great way to really...
To test the global waters?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, so just to wrap up here, can you maybe just give me some guidance on, you're obviously seeing trends globally, because you're seeing trends in, South Africa and in Europe and in the US. What have you kind of noticed? I mean, we've had such a shifting market over the past few years. Is there anything that is of real intrigue right now to investors, whether that's commodities or size? Is there anything that you've noticed?
It's really all over the board.
It's still all over there?
It really is. I mean, obviously right now, precious metals is jumping. People, I think copper, that's another one. Yeah. Lithium is one that we have seen a real resurgence in.
Yes, we have, haven't we?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. So I think honestly, it's the stories. It's, where to go and what to do and who to speak to. If you've got a good story, you've got something to actually say, then it's really about getting out there, being top of mind. Because when these investors are wanting to deploy capital, you want to be on their radar. And if you're not, that money is going to go to someone else. And that is just the bottom line. It's marketing 101. And I think that's the biggest thing people need to focus is keeping their name out there in any way that they can. And just working those markets and keeping up those relationships with the investors. I think that's one thing where some people go wrong is that they spend all this money, they go to these shows, they go to every show, but they're too busy between from one show to the next that they'll send an email, but then it just gets dropped. And
follow up.
And often what happens is that they won't hear back on their first attempt because they don't have a personal relationship with these guys, right? So, you know, when doing like an IR program, it's great to be able to do one with a company such as ours that has these relationships with the investors, because when we call them and say, hey, what did you think about, you know, company ABC, they're coming back to us and they're telling us the truth. So we're putting together these reports about, you know, you met with this company and this is what all the investors thought about your meetings.
That's
so
great.
It's like you get that insight that you just would never get.
Absolutely.
And the follow-up as well, right? Like, so they're following up with us. And we're able to provide that information to the clients. So it's invaluable, I think. And just in general, being able to have someone on your team that can stick with that follow-up is huge. It's really, I think, everything when it comes down to it.
Absolutely. Well, the CSE is excited. I think we're going to start joining you at some of these events. We're really excited about that. We have some CSE issuers that have already been joining you guys for years. So we're going to come and help support our issuers that are there and get a chance to be in some of these jurisdictions that our issuers want to access as well. So I'm looking forward to spending more time with you on the road, Josie.
Me too.
In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me today. And if our issuers want to learn more about you, where can they find information?
Yeah, definitely. They can just go to our website and, you know, depending where they're located, we've got other sales members around the globe that are happy to help them. So feel free to reach out to me and I can direct them to the right person. And we'd be happy to have the conversations and see how we can get you in front of the right investors in the right markets.
Amazing. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you so much.